Yeah, Chris, I want to thank you for inviting me, and I think I know quite a few of you on this call. I'm going to cover some of the same ground as Ben and Todd, and I'll try not to be too repetitive. There's a lot going on in the Great Salt Lake Basin as a whole, and I think the more we're aware of what everybody else is doing, the less duplication there can be, and we can continue to stand on each other's shoulders and keep moving this forward without too much duplication of effort. So this is somewhat of a potpourri of things we have going on here, and so like I said, I'll kind of move quickly here, get to where I can advance my slides. So yeah, again, I'm David O'Leary with the USGS Utah Water Science Center. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the Saline Lakes Integrated Water Availability Assessment, which I think a lot of you are aware of. So I'll move through those quickly. This is a study, USGS study that focuses on 20 saline lakes throughout the western United States, the Great Salt Lake being the largest. A lot of this, the legislation is primarily driven by the Audubon Society. So they're looking at wetland ecology, bird habitat, that type of thing. They've identified several water bird species that are at a threat in these saline lakes. So right now, Congress is in the process of voting on the bill. I'm not sure if it's passed. I think it's through the House and back to, I think it needs to go back through the Senate to deal with a couple of amendments that the House has, but the Saline Lakes bill is being advanced. So here you can see the 20 lakes throughout the West. Get this guy off of there, and just kind of conceptual model of how these birds utilize this system. And like I said, the Great Salt Lake's a major component of this. We have this, what's called an integrated water availability assessment, which Todd mentioned that the state's going to do one as well, which is obviously focused more on just the Great Salt Lake Basin. These are some of the major themes as part of this integrated water availability assessment. So how much water is there and how is it used? What are the hydrologic vulnerabilities of the lakes? What are the primary resources utilized by these birds and bugs and everything at each lake? And how is this changing over time? And then we get into these more bird questions. What's driving the bird densities, their use of saline lakes, and how much water is needed to sustain quality habitat. So those are some of the primary themes driving this work. So I do want to say that we at the USGS recognize the urgency of the situation, especially as it pertains to Great Salt Lake. I know some of these big legislative efforts can feel somewhat deliberative, and we are doing our best to communicate that up the chain to try to move things ahead because we are at some of these what are perceived to be critical tipping points. And so again, this Saline Lakes IWAS is dealing with this Great Basin region, subregions down to watersheds, and looking at individual lakes. So these are kind of the scales over which we're operating. And then the time scales that this is looking at are also on the long-term climactic, annual, seasonal, all the way down to daily. So it's really trying to be a holistic approach as we're studying these. I do want to thank, we hosted a workshop a couple months ago, the USGS did, and there's some folks here who attended. I want to thank everybody there who participated. That's really proven to be a critical piece of this, and I want to give an update as to where we stand right now. So we hosted these stakeholder workshops, and we took in what were perceived priorities and issues, and this one was focused on Great Salt Lake. So we're taking those along with a literature review to start to build this work plan, what we're calling the work plan development. So the literature review feeds into the work plan. And then we have these literature review will be delivered as a data release as well as reports. And as part of that, we have a gap analysis looking at management data, which the USGS is not a management agency. And then we're building up these sub teams with various types of expertise to look at how to study these issues. And this, like I said, the stakeholder engagement is ongoing. And this is one of the conceptual models. I think we showed this at the stakeholder group. We're kind of looking at these impacts as it builds from, the foundation in terms of water availability affecting water quality, affecting habitats, which affects the bird usage. And then these circles kind of show some of the variables that we can monitor as part of this. So this is trying to get a conceptual model of what we're doing with this Saline Lakes integrated water availability assessment. And then here's the view from 30,000 feet in terms of how we're doing this. It involves 2 mission areas, 3 regions, and 6 science centers, which you can see there. It's hard to see some of them there, the white stars. So Utah Water Science Center, we've got science centers in California, Nevada, and Oregon working on this. And these are some of the team members. Here are the goals for the science strategy and implementation plan. So we want to leverage knowledge and information from partners on the landscape. I will say Great Salt Lake in a lot of ways is far ahead of many of these other saline lakes in the West. It's been a focus for a lot longer. And so we are at somewhat of an advantage in that regard. And it kind of makes me proud of what's gone on here at the state level in terms of assessing and monitoring Great Salt Lake. So this existing knowledge, we want to integrate science initiatives to provide actionable science to inform decision-making for those managers that are on the ground. And then we want to be able to scale the data between the lakes. And then we talk about this adaptive implementation plan. And really what we're trying to get at there is that the system is changing so quickly. We need to be adaptive. You know, we're seeing these processes happen before our eyes. And so, you know, this whatever work plan we come out with this spring will have to likely be adapted as these lakes continue to change through time. So again, I have this slide up here. I want to thank those that were able to attend the Great Salt Lake workshop, or maybe if you attended some others. This just shows a real quick breakdown of the folks who were involved at all of these. And so we have federal NGOs, research institutes. You can see state of Utah shows up really nice in this bar graph. We had tribal participation. We saw state of California showing up there. Break down there, the federal agencies, and then the NGOs there are on the right. And again, I'm just showing this. I really want to thank those folks that were able to participate in the workshops and provide your time and input into those. So based on those workshops, we were able, this is specific to the Great Salt Lake workshop, we were able to identify what we're calling stakeholder priorities. So what folks are seeing as critical to monitoring these lakes. And so the first one is long-term standardized hydrologic and ecologic monitoring across the basin. So we need to standardize our monitoring. Great Salt Lake can really lead the way in that regard, I believe, just because so much is ongoing and has already been done. Number 2, to monitor and assess remediation efforts related to lake characteristics and wildlife. This is on open water and wetlands. We want to be able to forecast water availability in the future. And then track, this is the fourth one, be able to track what the birds are doing and how they're reacting to these changing ecosystems. This slide shows this is part of the literature review, which this literature review is pertinent to all 20 lakes, but there's quite a bit of literature, as you can see on the right there, relevant to Great Salt Lake. So this is showing it by lake, and this is just specific to the water budget articles we found relevant to Great Salt Lake there. So as you can see, compared to the other lakes, Great Salt Lake and the basin is pretty far along in terms of studies done, but there's still a lot more to do. And so I guess I'll start to dive into what does this gap analysis that we did mean for Utah, the Great Salt Lake, and even the Jordan River. So the first thing that we've identified is stream gaging. We still really need to, with these water budgets, we still really need to understand how much water is going in and out of the lake. And a big component of that is stream gaging. And so that's probably one of the first things we're going to do. This is showing one of the major stream gauges run by the USGS on the Jordan River here. And this is up to date. As of today, there's that blue pin there, shows the location of this one. But you can probably expect more stream gaging for Great Salt Lake, including inflows. So the Bear, Weber, as well as the Jordan River, additional gauges will probably come as a result of this. And I'm going to, nothing's certain. The work plan is still being developed, but I really foresee some significant gauging for Great Salt Lake coming out of this effort, which includes potentially more gauges on the Jordan River. The other thing in the water budget that we identified as a big gap is, well, evapotranspiration, which I won't go into today. There's a lot of efforts at the state level to look into that, how much water is leaving the lake. But this other one, groundwater inflows. And Todd mentioned a hydrologic model, and I'll kind of get into some modeling that's ongoing. In regards to groundwater inflows, there's a model that exists called the Great Basin Carbonate and Alluvial Aquifer System Model. You can see it there in the panel on the left. It's a really large groundwater model that's constructed by the USGS. The state of Utah funded a more finely discretized model on the Great Salt Lake Basin. You can see that model on the right. And the advantage to this is we can take this existing GBCAS model, which is really big and has been developed, it has been calibrated, and we downscale this model to the Great Salt Lake. And so this effort is ongoing. We're about a year into a 3-year study to build this model. And so an example is the GBCAS model has grid cells that are a mile on a side. The Great Salt Lake Basin model, which you can see the grid scale there on the right, we're downscaling it down to quarter-mile cells. And again, the advantage is a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of building that initial model framework has been done, and now we can drill down to a basin level. And I do point out that these models, there is the potential with this model that's being worked on to even drill down further with these models to kind of, you can find more finely discretize the cells and even make the modeled area smaller depending on the scale of interest in terms of what you're trying to model, what you're trying to look at. The other update for those that are into models is this is being updated from ModFlow, what's called ModFlow 2005 into ModFlow 6. And then there are talks to make this what's called a fully coupled model, where the groundwater model will be able to interface with surface water models, and so to account for all the water moving through the system. So this just shows, this is an example from the GBCAS model. You can see these groundwater discharges estimates to the lakes. Those are in the middle column. You can see there Utah Lake, Great Salt Lake. And so what we're really hoping, one of the things we're hoping to do with this model that drills down, the new model, is to get a much finer resolution on these numbers to understand groundwater as it moves through the Great Salt Lake Basin. So I'm wrapping up here. I'm trying to take this opportunity whenever I speak to folks. There is one thing I want to bring up, and that's as it relates to the USGS stream flow pages. Perhaps some folks do access USGS stream flow data. As I noted, there's a couple gauges along the Jordan River, and these the legacy pages are being replaced by what are called next generation monitoring pages. And so if you do access USGS data, you will start to see some changes to go from this as the legacy page. Here's what the real-time page looks like. And so I would encourage you, if you have any questions as this transition occurs, please reach out to us at the Utah Water Science Center. We can help talk you through it. And then last but not least, this is our long-term gauge on Great Salt Lake. This is at the marina. There's a photo of the marina there on the right. You can see it's starting to get muddy. That's our water level sensor there up in the air. The water is not good for reading now. And so we've shifted this long-term gauge from the salt air marina. Now we're taking readings on the south side of the causeway to replace those. As Todd mentioned, I think some of this work to dredge the marina is we do have a plan to bring that salt air gauge back online when the marina comes back in contact with the lake through gaging. And then I think Ben probably mentioned these. I had these up here. I just want to give updates as to the lake, and I think Ben gave these values, but as of today, we're at 4189.0. And the good news is it looks like we've reached our low for the year, which we typically do late fall anyways. And you can see there on this hydrograph, we're back on the upswing in terms of water levels, and really curious to see how that is affected by, as Ben mentioned, the potential sealing off of the causeway. And last but not least, I just want to if folks aren't aware, we have developed in cooperation with the state, some other folks, this Great Salt Lake Hydromapper, which is the idea is that it's kind of a central clearinghouse for data pertinent to Great Salt Lake. And so you can get things like water levels, lake water levels, that type of thing. And I think I'm just past 15 minutes, so I'll wrap it up. And thanks for your time.